Yep, hold on just a second. Yeah, I'm going to take care of it. I just got to toss a couple of things in there first. All right, let's see here real quick. O.J. Howard, Eric Ebron, Vance McDonald, and T.J. Hawkinson. All right. Let's go ahead and take this thing out. What's up, Headliner Nation? Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Talking about quarterbacks and tight ends for Week 11. I'm going to talk a little start and sit, combining two positions. Typically, we split these two positions out. I apologize that this episode was not out later this week. However, the stomach flu is running rampant through the Richardson household right now, so I need everyone to wish me luck that I can avoid it. But without further ado, got to get into it and talk about a lot of players this week. As always, being completely transparent, let's take a look at our numbers from last week. Now, first things first with quarterbacks, the one thing that I do want to mention with quarterbacks here is that I purposely started a lot of quarterbacks last week because of how many players were on a bye, because of how many players we had also injured. I specifically started a lot of players to say, look, this is the upside that we could see. I even mentioned it in that video because I had someone say, Kyle, you started so many quarterbacks. Why would you do that? That is exactly why. So I fully knew going into this week that I was going to have a lower score because not all of these quarterbacks were going to have that type of an output. So that's why that score is a little bit lower this week. Now, the next score to take a look at for tight ends, 63%. Could have been a lot better. Hollister was my biggest miss. Man, he played very, very well on Monday Night Football, which surprised me against the San Francisco 49ers, but he is definitely a guy that we want to own going forward. Greg Olsen was a big hit as well. I had him around tight end 4 last week, and he had a good week. Now let's take a look, though, again, where it actually matters. The biggest areas are rankings accuracy, and right now, 33 overall. Quarterbacks and tight ends just dropped a little bit last week on quarterbacks and tight ends. Again, I was a little overzealous with my quarterback rankings last week. I knew I was going to fall a little bit there, more than likely. Tight ends fell a couple of spots. Didn't have a bad week ranking tight ends, but unfortunately, there's just a couple of guys behind me that had really good weeks. And then another area to point out, wide receivers up into the top 10 at wide receiver. So top 10 of two positions right now. So really doing well with our accuracy rankings. Want to get back up towards that 25 overall spot, though. Going to keep working hard to get there. Without further ado, let's jump into it now. Let's talk about some quarterbacks and tight ends. Who are we going to start? Who are we going to sit for week 11? Again, including a lot of players in one video instead of separating quarterbacks and tight ends this week because we're on a little bit of a time crunch. Went with quarterbacks and tight ends together in this video. So we're going to be covering each game as it goes, both positions. Let's start with Dallas and Detroit. Dak's going to be a start for me, and then Driscoll's going to be a sit for me this week. The Cowboys allow the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Talked about this a little bit on the waiver wire episode with JD McKissick. The plan with Minnesota last week against Dallas with that pass rush was really getting rid of the ball really, really fast. Are they going to be able to do that? That's why JD McKissick, I think, is a guy I'm really looking at this week for PPR leagues. But Driscoll, he's going to have to get rid of the ball. He's not going to be able to wait on Galladay and Jones too much. Hawkinson, though, is a reason that I'm listing him as a start. I think you could target him quite often, and Dallas is allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. With Dak Prescott, he's going to be a start 100%. The Lions are allowing just over 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterback. He's in for a really good week. And then for Witten and Jarwin, I'm going to go ahead and sit both of these guys this week. I think we see quite a bit of points out of Ezekiel Elliott and out of the wide receivers this week. Unfortunately, I don't think we see a lot from the tight ends from Dallas, but Hawkinson, definitely a guy that I'm taking a look at being within that top 12 this week. For Jacksonville and Indianapolis, I'm playing it a little bit safe this week. Jacoby Brissett is a guy that I want to start early and often. However, his first game back this week, I'm going to play it safe with him. I'm going to look at some different options over Brissett this week. I definitely think he's going to be teetering on that start instead. I think he's going to end up being very, very close. If he were to go over, it wouldn't surprise me. Same thing with Nick Foles. We'll probably end up being pretty close. However, with both of these guys coming back from injuries this week, I'm going to look at some different options, some guys with potentially higher upside and ones that I might not have to worry about in terms of past injury, maybe flaring up again or being a little bit more limited than what we would like. And then again, with Oliver and DeVal from Jacksonville, we're going to go ahead and sit them. But I will start Doyle and Ebron this week. No T.Y. Hilton. Paris Campbell's still out. What are we going to see from Doyle and Ebron? I think we could get both of those guys in there, especially Jack Mother and Doyle. I think he's going to be the guy in terms of the volume this week. Ebron's always going to be a touchdown dependent play, but Doyle is the guy I think comes with that upside this week in terms of volume. I think you could see anywhere from 5 to 7 targets, 5 to 7 receptions. I think he could creep up into that 60, 70 yards. And again, if he hits pay dirt and gets that touchdown, then he gives you even better value for the week. The only start I have in this game, Buffalo at Miami, is going to be Josh Allen. Miami's giving up over 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. We know that they've been giving up quite a bit to them, so I will roll him out there this week in a plus upside matchup. Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm going to go ahead and leave him on the bench. It looks like he is going to end up playing this week. And then Mike Gesicki, he's the guy I'm not considering. I've talked about him a little bit. He was a guy on the waiver wire episode. I did have him as a start last week. Didn't end up giving that type of value last week. However, Buffalo is giving up the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, so don't want to risk it this week. And Dawson Knox had a pretty good game last week. I'd like to play him this week. However, it's been too up and down, too much of a roller coaster. I'm going to go ahead and sit him as well. Kirk Cousins might be a little bit of a surprise here. However, as we saw last week, playing against a team that did very well against the pass, it was a lot of short dump-offs, not really a whole lot of upside passing game for the Minnesota Vikings last week, and it could end up being the same thing this week, going up again against a Denver Broncos defense that has done a good job of limiting the passing game this season. Now, I will say, if Adam Thielen does end up suiting up this week, which we don't know for sure at this point as of this recording, if that's going to happen. If he does suit up, it changes things a little bit for me because now he's got all of his weapons out there. But if he's out, definitely not going to play Cousins this week. Also not going to start Brandon Allen as well. I'm going to go ahead and put him on the bench, leave him there against Minnesota. Even though Dak did pretty good last week, Dak and Allen are not the same person. Irv Smith Jr., I've gotten a few questions about him. I'm going to list him as a sit this week because Kyle Rudolph is my touchdown dependent play. As you saw last week, that's really where his points came from, a couple of touchdowns. At one point during the game, he had 2 receptions for 2 yards and 2 touchdowns. So getting into the end zone is going to be his big thing this week. Because of the way Dallas limits the passing game, especially to wide receivers, Kyle Rudolph is going to have to help out. However, Dalvin Cook is going to be the key this week. Denver's had a tough time stopping running backs this season. Cook could end up having a huge game this week. And Noah Fant's going to be a start for me as well. I think he's going to be a critical weapon for Allen down the stretch. As long as he's starting, Fant is going to have upside each and every week to be at least a low-end tight end one. That's likely where I will put him this week. I will roll him out there to stream if I am missing a guy like Cooper, buys, injuries, whatever it may be. Fant is the guy that you could end up streaming this week. Breeze and Winston are both going to be in my lineup this week. I know Breeze last week really disappointed against Atlanta. We had a lot of us had him up towards the 2nd or 3rd ranked overall quarterback, and it just didn't work out in his favor last week. It was a tough game. However, bouncing back this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers give up the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And then with Winston, New Orleans hasn't been that great at times either. It is at home, which is a little bit of a plus for him. They are giving up over 18 fantasy points per game. I'm going to get Jared Cook in the lineup this week. I haven't been a big Jared Cook fan this season. However, with the amount of points that Tampa Bay is giving up, the 2nd most fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends, definitely going to get Cook in there, especially with a high-volume game last week. Saw 7 targets, which is what we needed to see with Drew Brees being back in the lineup. Those two didn't really connect at the beginning of the season, but maybe now they will be connecting a little bit more. And O.J. Howard, he was a definite start for us last week in that matchup against Arizona. However, in this matchup, we're going to go ahead and slide him back to the bench. Not really going to trust him too much this week. A whole lot of sits this week when New York heads to Washington, and that's because there isn't just a whole lot of upside. Haskins is way too inconsistent. We've seen a lot of turnovers from him this year. Even though the New York Jets defense has been riddled with injuries and hasn't been nearly what they thought it would have been, still not going to trust Haskins this week. With Sam Darnold, I'm going to go ahead and list him as a sit. I mean, the guy could end up throwing for 200 yards and maybe a touchdown. However, I think we're going to see a ton of Le'Veon Bell this week. week against Washington. And then with Sprinkle and Griffin going to be the starter the rest of the way. I'm going to look for some more favorable matchups for him. Herndon obviously done for the season now at this point. Griffin has looked better than he did at the start of this year than he has in the last couple of games. So maybe we're going to see a little bit more volume uptick for him. But again, I'm not still trusting him at this point, especially in a matchup where I think we're going to see so much of the run game and not nearly as much of the passing game. Matt Ryan and Kyle Allen are both going to be a start for me this week. Kyle Allen is getting an Atlanta defense that has given up the fourth most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. They did away with Drew Brees and the Saints last week. However, was it sheer luck, or are they actually going to be getting better? I think I'm going to lean a little bit more towards luck. So I like Allen in this matchup at home. Now with Matt Ryan, Carolina's been pretty good against quarterbacks in the pass game this year. However, I think this is going to be a game flow type of situation because I think Carolina is going to run all over Atlanta with Christian McCaffrey and make the passes when they need to. I think they're going to control a lot of the game, chew up a lot of the clock. Atlanta's going to have to throw the ball a lot because I think at this point Carolina is going to take care of Atlanta easily at home. Again, last week Atlanta came out of nowhere. I don't think it's going to happen the same way this week at home. Carolina takes care of business. A lot of running the football, a lot of controlling the clock, scoring quite a bit as well. With that being said, Matt Ryan is going to have to throw a lot. He's going to have to throw often because of the fact that they're probably going to have to play catch up a lot, which might eliminate a little bit of the run game. I do think it eliminates... I think that eliminates Brian Hill, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a different episode. Jake's already talked about it. We'll talk about it on our rankings episodes and on the live show this week. But I think we're going to see a lot of passing from Matt Ryan, and we could see a little Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley particularly, keeping an eye on him this week. Now with the tight end position, Greg Olsen, definitely going to be starting him this week. Love that matchup for Greg Olsen. For Luke Stocker, not going to go with him. Not going to go ahead and try to get cute here. Austin Hooper is out, and typically this would be a matchup where I would love Austin Hooper. However, with Stalker, I'm not going to go ahead and get him in there this week just because I don't think he's going to step in and be that type of replacement that Hooper was. Two of the best young and most exciting quarterbacks in the game, Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson, 100% getting both of these guys in our lineup this week. That is a no doubt start for both of these guys, so put them in your lineup. Don't think twice about it. Mark Andrews will be a start for me as well. Mark Andrews continues to see a decent amount of volume. Good game last week against Cincinnati. However, on the flip side, Darren Fells, a guy who I've liked for quite a while this year, a guy that has great touchdown upside every single week. Going to list him as a start this week. Same thing for Akins as well. Baltimore is giving up under 10 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends right now. So just don't see nearly enough upside with either of these guys this week. Would love to start Fells, but again, he has to hit his touchdown, and he's going to have to get a couple of catches after that because more than likely he won't see the volume this week. Even though San Francisco has been really good, I'm not sitting Kyler Murray. A couple of weeks ago against San Francisco, looked really good, threw out of the pocket well, moved around really well. I'm going to go ahead and roll with him again this week. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be a start for me as well. Even in that Thursday night matchup, unfortunately didn't love either of those guys then. I'm going to go ahead and switch tunes now and go with both of them, especially when you're getting Arizona, who is giving up 24 points per game to opposing quarterbacks, the most in the Fantasy Football League. I am going to go ahead and run with Ross Dwelly this week as well. Arizona is giving up the most fantasy points per game to opposing tight end. I'll go ahead and throw him out there this week, and I think he's going to be upwards of that low tight end 1 status. Definitely think he has a shot at a touchdown. We already know at this point George Kittle is going to be missing this week. Probably a good move to go ahead and sit him. Even though fantasy owners are going to be missing him, I think Dwelly could be a decent fill-in for you. And as always, Charles Clay is on the bench. This one might be a little surprising for everyone to see that in Cincinnati and Oakland, we are going to be starting every player. Carr, Finley, Waller, Eifert, we're going to be playing all of them. As far as the quarterbacks go, both of these teams are in the top 5 in terms of most fantasy points per game allowed to opposing quarterbacks. With Finley last week, he really didn't play all that bad. He played a lot better than I anticipated going up against this Oakland defense. Definitely has an opportunity for volume because more than likely, Oakland is going to be leading a majority of the time. And with Carr, definitely see a lot of upside in him this week. Now for the tight ends, Tyler Eifert definitely, I think, has a ton of touchdown upside this week. The Oakland Raiders Raiders are giving up the second most touchdowns to opposing tight ends this year, the fourth most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends this year. Definitely an opportunity for him to jump out and have a really good game. A great streaming option for you this week. And for Darren Waller, we're going to continue to start him. Yes, he hasn't been great the last couple of games, but you throw him out there because the guy could literally boom at any single time. One of those weeks could be this week. You have to start him no matter what, unless you have another top 1, 2, or 3 option, because Waller is going to be a top 5 option every single week. From being shocked because I'm starting everyone in a game to being shocked because I'm starting hardly anyone in this game, New England and Philadelphia, I think is going to be a tough matchup for the Eagles. Tom Brady, we're going to roll with him, especially with the way the Eagles' pass defense has been this year. On the flip side of it, though, for the Eagles, though, I'm not running with anyone. Now, it might be a bold take, it might be a hot take, whatever you may want to call it. I'm not rolling with anybody from Philadelphia, even at home this week. I'm going to put Wentz on the bench, I'm going to put Ertz on the bench, and I'm going to put Goddard on the bench. Now, I will say this about Ertz. Unless you have a better option, you're going to have to start him. You don't have a choice, especially if you're running in a 1 QB league, in a 1 tight end league where you only have 1 tight end. More than likely, you probably won't find anyone on the bench, especially with how bad a lot of tight ends have been this year, and especially with how many injuries we've had. So more than likely, you have to roll with him. However, I do not see double-digit points for him this week. And the main reason for that is the last time New England was on the field, they got beat by the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson ran all over the top of them, played very, very well. This is a defense that has been great all season long. They're in terms of fewest points allowed, they're the very bottom for both quarterbacks and tight ends. They've been very good against all the positions so far this year. I think they're going to come out off of the bye, ready to play. They're going to put it to the Eagles, and they're going to want to show everyone, look, we have a high caliber defense. It's not just because we played a bunch of nobodies. It is because we are this good, and they are going to take some frustrations out on the Eagles, and I think the Eagles are going to have a pretty bad week. So Eagles fans, don't give me too much flack right now. If you want to tell me I'm wrong after the game, feel more than welcome to. I will listen at that point. However, for right now, just hear me out. This could be a tough game this weekend. Root for your team because they're going to need it. For the Bears and Rams, I'm going to put Gerald Everett in my lineup, but he's going to be the only one. The Bears giving up the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. For Trubisky and Goff, they both have been far too inconsistent this year. With as good as the Bears have been against the pass, I'm not going to roll with Goff this week. I think we're seeing a very limited ceiling and a really low floor for him. Same thing for Trubisky. Really, his only game that he's had that's been any good recently is against the Lions, and that's really not saying a whole lot. As far as the tight end position goes for the Bears, we're not going to do anything with Burton this week. The tight end position has been a mess for the Bears all season long. They carry absolutely no upside in terms of putting them in your lineup. All right, last matchup, Kansas City and the Los Angeles Chargers. This one kind of speaks for itself. Patrick Mahomes, you're definitely going to put him in your lineup. Travis Kelce, you're definitely going to put him in your lineup. Hunter Henry, you're definitely going to put him in your lineup. For Phillip Rivers, though, I'm not going to put him in the lineup, even though this is probably going to be a game script in which we can see a lot of Phillip Rivers. We saw a bad side to Phillip Rivers last week against Oakland. Too many turnovers, didn't look comfortable. Could it be the same thing against the Kansas City Chiefs? Now, the pass rush, that might be a little down this week. However, the secondary continues to be very, very good. I think there's going to be a lot of problems for Rivers this week. I see him as probably a high-end quarterback 2 at best, but not creeping into that quarterback 1 status. Mahomes, Kelce, and Henry, though, you're starting those 3 no matter what. Headliner Nation, as always, it's been a great time. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. And thank you for getting us to 80,000 subscribers in 2019. What an awesome way to start wrapping up the season, to basically break our goal by 10,000 subscribers. This is awesome. Cannot thank you thank you nearly as much. However, if this is your first time tuning in, hit that subscribe button right down below. Click on the subscribe button. And most importantly, turn on that bell notification so anytime we go live or drop content, you are going to be notified right away. And of course, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. But don't forget, we're going to be dropping our rankings videos as well. Those can help with a lot of questions. Use those in conjunction with the start and sit videos. This is where you get a lot of that information, some more breakdown. The rankings is where we really tell you these are the guys in what order. Headliner Nation, thanks again. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you on the next video. Have a good one.